Kurt Busch thought his NASCAR career was quietly coming to an end until one sentence from Michael Jordan completely changed how he saw his entire life in racing. More than 2 decades in NASCAR had given him everything a driver could want: championships, wins, respect. It had also given him scars. By the time the 2020 season ended, Kurt Busch was no longer the fiery young talent people once feared on pit road. He was a veteran, a survivor, and quietly, a man wondering how much longer he had left. At that moment, a phone call changed everything. On the other end of the line was Michael Jordan, not the global icon, not the 6-time NBA champion, but a competitor who recognized something familiar in Kurt Busch. That conversation would later be described by Busch as a moment where he nearly melted on the spot. One sentence from Jordan would end up summing up Busch's entire NASCAR career better than any statistic ever could. But to understand why that moment mattered so much, you have to understand who Kurt Busch really is. Kurt Busch entered NASCAR with raw speed and raw emotion. He was talented immediately, aggressive immediately, controversial immediately. In the early 2000s, Busch was known as much for his temper as for his driving ability. He won races. He won a Cup Series championship in 2004, but he also burned bridges. His intensity often crossed lines, and the sport did not always know what to do with him. Teams changed, relationships fractured. Busch bounced between organizations, sometimes rebuilding his reputation, sometimes damaging it again. Through it all, one thing never changed. Kurt Busch raced with everything he had. He did not coast. He did not protect his image. When he was behind the wheel, it was personal. That approach cost him at times. It also kept him relevant long after many thought he would fade away. By the late 2000s, Busch had evolved. Still intense, but wiser. Still aggressive, but more controlled. He became a valuable leader in the garage, especially for younger drivers. His win at the 2017 Daytona 500 was not just another trophy. It was validation that he could still rise to the biggest moment in the sport. Yet even with that success, Busch felt the weight of time. When the opportunity came to join a brand new NASCAR team co-owned by Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan, it was not an obvious yes. 23XI Racing was unproven. New teams fail all the time. Busch had already seen the highs and lows of NASCAR. That hesitation is what led to the conversation. Michael Jordan wanted Kurt Busch for one reason, not because of his resume, not because of his championship, but because of how he competed. Jordan told Busch that he raced the same way Jordan played basketball, from the heart. That line hit Busch harder than any contract offer ever could. He later admitted that hearing those words from Michael Jordan almost made him melt. For a driver who had been criticized, doubted, and written off so many times, the validation mattered. Jordan was not talking about perfection. He was talking about intensity, about commitment, about refusing to give less than everything when it mattered. Jordan did not see Busch's past as baggage. He saw it as proof. For Busch, that moment reframed his entire career. The mistakes, the blow-ups, the controversies, they were not signs of weakness. They were signs of someone who cared too much to be passive. That belief convinced Busch to join 23XI Racing. When Busch arrived, the team was still finding its footing. Bubba Wallace was the centerpiece. Kurt Busch was the anchor. He brought experience, credibility, and a sense of urgency. He helped shape the culture of the organization. He won at Kansas Speedway in 2022, delivering one of the most important victories in the young team's history. It was not just a win, it was proof that the gamble had worked. Busch made 20 starts with 23XI Racing. Each race felt like a continuation of the promise Jordan had seen in him, but the story would not end the way anyone hoped. In 2022, Busch suffered a concussion during qualifying at Pocono. The injury forced him out of the car. Weeks turned into months. The recovery did not progress the way Busch wanted. Eventually, reality set in. His driving career was over. There was no farewell tour, no final race, no slow goodbye, just a sudden stop. For someone who raced from the heart, walking away was brutal, but even then, Busch handled it with a maturity that showed how far he had come. He stayed involved with the team. He mentored younger drivers. He remained a presence in the garage. The fire was still there. It just had nowhere to go. When news broke that Kurt Busch would be inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame in 2026, it felt like a full-circle moment. Not just because of the wins or the championship, but because the sport finally recognized the complexity of his journey. Busch was never easy to define. He was never easy to love, but he was impossible to ignore. And that's exactly why Michael Jordan understood him. Jordan built his legacy on an obsession with winning, on intensity that often made teammates uncomfortable, on a refusal to compromise. Those traits made Jordan great. They also made him controversial. He saw the same thing in Busch. When Jordan told Busch that he raced from the heart, it was not flattery. It was recognition. One competitor acknowledging another. That single sentence captured what decades of analysis could not. Kurt Busch was not driven by image. He was driven by emotion, by pride, by the need to prove himself every time he strapped into the car. That mindset fueled his best moments and his worst ones. It pushed him to championships and into trouble. It kept him relevant long after the sport had moved on from his generation. And in the end, it earned him a place in the Hall of Fame. Kurt Busch's story is not about perfection. It is about endurance, about learning, about channeling chaos into purpose. His partnership with Michael Jordan was not about brand power or headlines. It was about mutual understanding. Two competitors from different worlds recognizing the same fire. When Busch looks back on his career, that phone call stands out not because it came from a global icon, but because it came from someone who truly understood him, someone who did not ask him to change, someone who saw value in the way he fought. For Kurt Busch, that was enough. It validated every lap, every mistake, every comeback that defined Kurt Busch's long and complicated journey through NASCAR, because it reframed his career not as a collection of highs and lows, but as a continuous act of belief and effort that never faded. The wins mattered, the championship mattered, and the trophies will always be there. But what truly gave his career meaning was the understanding that none of it was wasted. Not the failures, not the suspensions, not the moments when people doubted whether he belonged anymore. Those moments became proof that he kept showing up, kept fighting, and kept caring in a sport that eventually moves on from everyone. When his career ended, it did not slip away quietly or fade into the background, because it ended with purpose, respect, and clarity about who he had been all along. From his early explosive years to his final role helping build a new team, Busch left behind something more than statistics. He left behind a reputation as someone who never gave half effort. That is why the ending mattered so much, because it closed the circle on a career that had always been fueled by emotion rather than comfort. It was remembered for exactly what it was, a career driven by instinct, pride, and relentless competitiveness, shaped by growth, pain, and redemption. In the end, Kurt Busch's story was never about being perfect or universally loved. It was about racing from the heart every single time he climbed into the car.